there's a lot engineering design that went into this, even though that this is our systems engineering approach. The hydrogen computer system you see here will be miniaturized down to several IC chips, which will allow us to give the economics to apply to a conventional car. Over here, there's very unique design features that had to be developed in order to develop the water fuel cell as a retrofit energy systems to conventional cars. Can you zoom in back in here? 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 The unit you see right here, this is referred to as a resonant cavity. Water is now fed into the resonant cavity through this water tank, and as such, we now expose the water to a very high intense pulse voltage field and restrict the amps, and therefore the electrical polarization process now allows us to release the hydrogen economically from water. And by attenuating the voltage field, the amplitude of the voltage field, we now can control the rate of the production of the hydrogen gas on demand. So this is what's referred to as a constant demand generator. We also now extend or allow the voltage amplitude to increase even to a higher level and allow the water atoms to go into an ionization state, which gives us the ability even to produce a higher energy yield by producing more hydrogen gas on demand. So the fuel now coming from the water through the electrical polarization process going into resonance meaning that we're actually tuning into the dielectric properties of water, and it allows us to reduce amps flow down to a minimum and allow voltage to take over that disassociates the water molecule on demand. And those fuel gases are now coming through this electronic injector system as you see here. So basically we're now feeding the ionized air from the gas processor. We're now also taking the water fuel gases that are now coming from ordinary water. We are now mixing it with the non-combustible gases and the ambient air gases and regulating those control of the fluid mediums or for fluid mediums. And as a result, now we can tune in and allow this engine to run off of natural water. Control of the fluid mediums or for fluid mediums. This is demonstrated in our systems engineering approach on the technology that we can apply it to other applications, not only in the transportation area but also in industrial applications. So it's paramount that we would demonstrate and have the technology solved for design engineering, retrofitting to existing energy consuming devices, whether it's being run in an internal combustion engine or a diesel engine or hook it to an industrial process. So all of these design interfacing technology is now being solved. We are in the latter stages of what we call the pre-engineering system, which will now allow us to miniaturize the technology once we're completed on the design applications and take it into mass production. Give you a classical example of this. We've also developed from this technology, which we call the water fuel cell injector. And basically, this injector now is a miniaturized water fuel cell or miniaturized resonant cavity. And this technology now allows us to simply replace, we can bypass this part of the systems approach and now simply replace the spark plug with the water fuel cell injector. And as a result now, we can run the water up to the injector, which is now being processed and being exposed to a very high pulse voltage frequency. And as a result, as the water fuel is being going into the system, then the explosion takes place inside the cylinder. Therefore, it makes this an extremely fail-safe operable system. The cord that you see here is strictly hooks up to a very high intensity voltage pulse, and we restrict the amps to cause the electrical polarization process, which in turn the voltage amplitude now takes it and goes in the ionization state to perform the hydrogen fracturing technology, and then in turn the high pulse voltage frequency now allows the ignition of the gases. So therefore we do this electronically, and so this technology has taken us down to the water fuel cell water fuel injector, as you see here today, which gives us a very economical way of simply converting and running a conventional car ordinary on natural water. So basically what we do is we feed ordinary natural water in here, non-processed natural water. We now feed the ambient air gases being ionized. It's being mixed with the water. And then we mix the non-combustible gases going in the system that regulates the control that allows us now to release the thermal explosive energy from hydrogen and do it on a controlled means on gasoline and diesel fuel. Many people do not realize that when you run a car or truck on either gasoline or diesel fuel, you're actually running it on hydrogen. And all we're doing is using the hydrogen from water. And under the National Bureau of Standards figures shows that when you use water, the energy release is roughly 2.5 times more powerful than that of gasoline. So water is a very powerful fuel. And all you needed to do was solve the answers of, number one, producing the hydrogen economically, controlling it on demand, being able to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen gas to co-equal the fossil fuels, and the third one was to be able to transport it without spark ignition. And we've solved all of these problems on the design engineering, and of course the water fuel injector, as I've shown you, now gives us the abilities to transport the water directly to the fuel injector, which is now going into the voltage zones, which now is performing the electrical polarization process that goes and triggers the hydrogen fracturing technology, but it's doing it inside the engine. So we all know that natural water is very stable, and therefore it becomes a very fail-safe operable system, as we pointed out earlier, and using ordinary natural water. You add nothing to the water. You don't process the water in any way. Now here's another feature to the system that everybody asks me about, is what happens to the water in the wintertime? Does it freeze up? Well, part of our technology was in the areas of development what we call a steam resonator. Now, since the unlike atoms take on opposite electrical charges, we simply use another part of our technology to restrict the ampere voltage to take over, and therefore we agitate the water molecules, which in turn generates kinetic energy, which in turn heats the water. Now, this is phenomenal in the fact we consume very little electrical energy in order to heat the water. So there are very far-ranging advantages and features to the technology, ranging even in the areas that we now have a way of using voltage and by switching off amp flow and dealing with the environmental control areas. We're developing the technology in the areas of desalination of salt water. Whenever you have a free and abundant energy source like water, it's only limited to the imagination to put it to work. This technology is very applicable to desalination of the salt water, handling of toxic waste chemicals by high pulse voltage frequency and restrict the amps. We now can separate the molecular structure of toxic chemicals and render them useless and safe. It also takes us to the technology of combining unlike atoms that heretofore was not possible under the natural state of covalent link-up. This led us to the development of the EPG electrical generator technology, where we're able to manufacture a magnetized gas that exists at room temperature and enhance the electromagnetic field without increasing mass. So our technology since the time of the Arab embargo has been very far-reaching to give us a comprehensive energy source that we literally can use anywhere into the economies and move in a bilateral movement throughout the economies of the world to bring an energy source in. So it's imperative that we developed a technology that we can move very quickly, and of course water was the answer to it because water is a very free and abundant energy source. And so this technology has led us to the abilities of harnessing and using the water in this particular way, which we call the water fuel cell technology.
Do you have an indication of the amount of energy stored in a gallon of water compared to a barrel of oil, for instance?
Yes. As I pointed out earlier, when you separate the hydrogen and oxygen gases and go into the gas ignition process, its energy release is roughly 2.5 times that of gasoline. Now note the reference is not 2.5 times that of fingernail polish, It's 2.5 times that of gasoline. But in the hydrogen fracturing technology, we have developed a technology, as the Lord has shown me, that by igniting the hydrogen and oxygen gases and setting up a condition by which the water molecule is prevented to form, then we now can tap into a very higher energy yield. And as a result of this, the hydrogen fracturing technology shows that we can release energy up to beyond 2.5 million barrels of oil per gallon of water and do it safely. And as I had shown you earlier, we are now preparing this technology to be retrofitted directly to a jet commander, which we plan not only to fly around the world nonstop around the equator, but turn 90 degrees and go from the North and South Pole. So it's a tremendous amount of energy source. And what we've done is found a triggering process to allow us to release this tremendous amount of energy and do it safely. So it gives us the ability to not only sustain and maintain the economies of the world, but also give us the abilities to handle the environmental pollution problems at the same time. We can't keep putting CO2 in the air and expect that the energy level is going to be there even for our plants. And we all talk about the greenhouse effect, but very few people come up with a viable answer to it. And the water fuel cell technology gives us the ability to get us. Well, if you notice on my logo, you'll see Job 38, verse 22 and 23. And this is where the Lord is talking to Job, and he asks Job this question. He says, have you considered the treasures of snow, or have you considered the treasures of hell, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against battle and war? Now, the interpretation of the scriptures are as follows. Is not snow the most beautiful part about water? That no one snowflake looks